Welcome everybody to the first of the Trialogues. We're gonna try something different, and we're calling it the Trialogues after Ricardo Calvario's suggestion of bringing back this ancient tradition. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. Of course, you know me, Headless Giant, and go ahead, Ricardo, and then we'll go to you, Ethan.
Sure. Thank you and welcome for being with us in this first trialogue. I'm hoping that this is some kind of a revival of one of my favorite types of conversations that was done for many years by Ralph Abraham, that is a mathematician, Rupert Sheldrake, that is a biologist, and Terence McKenna, that I think needs no introduction. Everyone knows who he is. And they did it for 11 years, I think, and they unfortunately only recorded the last year of their meeting. So many decades have passed, and I never seen that reproduced. So I'm hoping that we can have excellent discussions, not necessarily agreeing with one another, but learning from it instead of creating animosity between us. So I'll pass the word to Ethan then.
Honored to be here, you guys, and what wonderful way to learn things that the dialogues present to the reader, and the trialogues certainly to all involved, and also the reader too, of the famous Socratic Greek relevance. So yeah, honored to be here. And I'm a writer and contributor on Occult Rejects frequently. So thanks, Headless, and thanks, Ricardo.
Sure, thank you. Thank you both for this.
Thank you for being here. So it's a beautiful day out there. I'm going to have to go mute sometimes because we get a lot of bikers coming through and they've got loud ass vehicles. I'm just letting you know right off the bat. So I put in the description that we're going to go where the wind takes us. So I
Sure.
think it's important to start with, I think, maybe a little talk of the weather and some of the strange weather we've been having recently, because I think that's going to be a recurring theme in the months and years to come. Is the strange weather and what the establishment's going to blame it on and what is actually going on. So, what about you, Ricardo? Do you have any thoughts on this strange weather patterns and the things that have been happening over there in Europe?
Well, we I don't think anyone can say exactly what is going on, but there are many signs that pointing in one direction, right? And it's all related to the weakening of the magnetic field, the sun itself, the cycle of the great year. I think it's all related. We have this consecutive catastrophes every 6,000 years, or 3,200 years, or 12,000 years, and so on. They are well documented. And a funny thing that probably you guys don't know on the other side of the Atlantic is we had just the past 2 days 3 tornadoes in Portugal. So the images normally of a tornado here, that was something that we see from 7 years in 7 years, or 10 in 10 years. It would be just a little flake funnel, a little funnels that could create some damage, but just minor stuff. And now they're still calling them minor tornadoes, and we see a huge funnel taking the roofs and taking down trees and walls by the throwing pieces of trees into the houses through the windows, because we like big windows here. And they still call it the little tornadoes, and a rare event. And we had it 3 in 2 days, when it's something unheard of here, especially with winds up to 150 kilometers an hour. So it's way beyond what is normal here. But we can add to that aurora borealis seen in places that were never seen before. Tasmania had a spectacular aurora borealis just 2 or 3 nights ago. In Portugal, in the north, from about 200 kilometers north of where I am, they are seeing aurora borealis with no significant storms to justify it. So one thing is good: we don't have to go to Norway anymore to go and see them. But but I would prefer to have to do that instead of thinking of what it may mean. And then we have the blackouts. We had that in Indonesia with the same aerial phenomenon that was recorded here above the Pyrenees when the cables caught fire and the 15 gigawatts of energy disappeared instantly. So a lot of things to ponder here. What's your take on this?
Well, if I was going to make the kind of assumption of a polar shift, I think that would fit all of those sort of individual things because we're due for one, and it seems like all of this weird weather is associated with some other kind of event going on. It's not just in Europe. If people don't know, Europe doesn't have tornadoes, right?
No.
So Americans, we think of tornadoes as being like this Midwest thing, you know, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, all these Midwest states, because you have these massive fields of energy coming together and, you know, creating these storms. But in Europe, they don't have those same type of weather patterns that produce the type of tornadoes we see here. Now, there would be lots of places that would be good candidate for tornadoes, Spain and Portugal being one of them, because the fields in the Iberian Peninsula are so large that when you have these two massive supercells coming together, you would have, uh, you know, possible tornado events. But if you guys only had dust devils before and you're starting to see tornadoes now, that's an indication that something different is really changing.
Sure. Because
Yeah, I remember growing up and reading that tornadoes only took place in basically the United States, right? And only certain plains would allow it. And then recently, even in years past, we started seeing them in frequency in urban environments where there's buildings and so forth. And that even is supposed to be difficult for tornadoes to maintain and build up in that type of environment. So we've seen these storms really increase in energy, right, all over, and frequency. Hurricanes too, right? So you know, one thing I don't think is calculated, that I haven't seen calculated as far as like environmental effects, is the release of radioactive elements into the system, which for instance, the complexity of such occurring is when it hits, if a particle that's radioactive is in the air, it does one thing and it's predictable, and that's how they measure the radioactivity rate of its, you know, degradation. But if it goes into seawater, it actually goes nano. It breaks apart into hyper small particles and has a whole different reaction. And so I just wonder how much energy is being put into the world system, whether it's seawater or atmospheric or so on, via these chain reactions, if literally, and making there be kind of hyper energy potential instead of normal energy potential. And I know it's a little out there, but it's not really measured. And I also secondarily wonder how much that influences the climate change, if you will, of the planet. You know, the nuclear experimentation sites heating up large bodies of water, for instance, is just one little you know, fact that they don't measure, you know, the influence of, but it certainly must have some kind of influence. Just speculating,
sure, I think one of the phenomena that most people don't realize, and Dr. Longo spoke about this when we had with him, although he mentioned only the stream gulf, but the stream gulf is just a part of the system. The system is the North Atlantic circulation area that brings the hot to the British Isles and then brings the cool down to the Gulf Stream again. This system is slowing down, and we know for a fact that if it stops, we enter immediately into an ice age. immediately, and it's slowing down. And what causes this slowing down is, and now I'm going to sound like I'm supporting the climate agenda, but I'm not. What is slowing it down is the entry of sweet water into the ocean that lowers the salinity. If the salinity lowers beneath a certain point, it will stop the current. It ceases to exist. We know that systems in place will make it happen again, but it might stop for 1,000 years or 2,000 years or 3,000 years. No one knows. And if it stops, the cold immediately starts stretching south and south and south and creating a new ice age. Now, it's a fact that there is more melting in the summer, but there is also more ice in the winter. And the ice has been growing every single year, which means there's more ice melting into the ocean, because the ocean remains. Only the salt water does not evaporate. Only the vapor of water that evaporates doesn't have salt, so the salt remains in the sea. But then it comes as sweet water again. So that's desalinization is a constant process, because there is more ice being created and then more ice being melted and so on. So this is just one of the factors, as Ethan was saying, that makes the anthropogenic contribution seem like minuscule compared to the changes that are being caused by nature itself and by the very own process of the Earth. As you explained, the Earth is also speeding up. The core is not acting as we thought it would act. And more, these low shear velocity zones that we now understand to be the inner core beneath the crust are not a filled planet at all. It's a half hollow almost planet filled with these huge channels of magma that is a completely different view of the spheres that we had in school of how was the inside of the Earth. That's not how it is. It's not homogeneous at all. Just as a curiosity, how many of you have ever been to a place where there is a downhill, but because of the gravity anomaly, when you're going downhill, your sensation is that you're going uphill, and when you're going uphill, your sensation is as you go downhill. In fact, I used to take people to this place near Cap de Roca, where I stop the car on the downhill, and it's well pronounced. And I take the foot off the brakes, take the foot off the pedals, and the car starts going backwards up the hill. And so then when we experience on foot, it's obvious that something is wrong, because your body doesn't even know correctly how to balance, because it's not understanding how you are going down, but you're feeling that you are going up. So you can't process that thing immediately. So
right. We have these in America too. They say it's a perspective error, but I don't think it's.
It isn't. The car doesn't go backwards on a hill because it's a perspective.
Right.
Noise.
Right. So they also have areas where you have like train tracks, and if you supposedly stop on the train tracks and put baby powder on the back of your car will be pushed off of the train tracks, and you'll see little hands in the back. And they've got these urban legends about like a bus being stuck on the train tracks and being, smashed by a train. And so all the little ghosts are there pushing you off of the train tracks, supposedly. But I mean, there's so many different places like this that aren't being studied by science, because it's all just folklore. We don't study folklore in science somehow. But so many of these anomalies and anomalous areas just go completely under the radar of any serious scientist, anybody with the type of instruments to actually measure the results there. But we do know that there are parts of the Earth that have more gravity than other parts. The density within the planet shifts from region to region, and based upon the materials in the planet, you're going to have different types of gravitational pulls in those areas.
Well, in this case, they explain it because this is obvious. I'm talking a very inclined road where gravity is inverse. So obviously they have to explain something, because a lot of people, sometimes even people might have an accident because when they accelerate to do the going up, and this is a very twisty road. This is the small section of road where you can do this. It has, I don't know, 300 feet It's a very tight corner, 180 degrees, and then you have another height at 190 degrees on top of it. So people accelerate, and then you have the push of the inverse effect of gravity, and they reach the top much faster than they are expecting. So they explain this by the Wolframian mine that was a Wolframian mine that was digged for the First World War effort. I don't know why the First World War needed wolframium, but that was supposedly be one of those mines. But I don't believe that explanation, because all of that creates is vacuums in the earth. So that to me, it doesn't explain it. But it is real. Oh yes, it is real. Yeah.
I love how that's the first thing they jump to is it must be a mining thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the Tommyknockers is very well established in the Northeast, where you can hear, it sounds like miners under the ground knocking or doing something, but they're like, well, you know, maybe it's the earth shifting or something like that. They don't actually study it, but it might be that. So we'll go with that.
Look, and Ethan, I think it'll be something for you to consider. This is a clear case of uniformitarianism is not working, because what is happening faster than we have recorded before in time. So they say that the continents go apart or go together by this 2 or 3 centimeters a year, and it has happened every time. That's how they calculate Pangea millions and millions and millions of years ago. But that's completely idiotic, because there's periods where that is going to move very, very fast. So those dates are completely wrong. But what I'm saying here is we are starting to see this catastrophic events that are not uniformitarian at all. So these tornadoes, these anomalous weather patterns or effects, these auroras, are showing that we are not going in an uniformitarian way. We are going into a cataclysmic way or catastrophic way as the only way to explain this.
Yeah.
And that's why science doesn't dive into it, because they are all uniformitarians. So they can't accept this.
Well, and I mean, even in their measure of their supposed, I saw someone mentioned anthropogenic climate change, and even in their measure of it, they're not taking into account certain things, like I pointed out, radiation. So, I mean, their numbers are always going to be wrong, because even if they're, correct in their numbers, they're not measuring everything. One thing that it, like with the nuclear experiment, they claim that tritium is naturally occurring radioactive element, and it does naturally occur. It is created in the upper atmosphere when water vapor hits the sun. That's the only time it is made. So there is a certain amount of tritium in the natural environment, but they're also creating a ton more, and it's the type of radioactive substance that is basically unstoppable. There's no layering that it doesn't go through, because it's essentially water. So that's just one element, and there's so much more of it being released into the environment that they claim it's natural. And again, it's only created in the upper atmosphere, that's in a certain manner, but every nuclear power plant is releasing tons of, well, I don't know exactly how much, but a lot of water that has tritium in it, with certainty.
That water angle is really,
it adds energy. Sorry, Headless.
that water angle is really important when it comes to global warming, because everybody admits that the number one cause of the greenhouse gas effect is water vapor. And it's the water vapor that is in the form of clouds in the sky that is keeping the heat in. That's why it's called, the greenhouse gas effect. That's a
lie. It's CO2. It's CO2.
Now, here's the thing about the CO2 that we have in fossil fuels. If all that CO2 is under the ground in the form of this fossilized algae, right, that means that it was at one time up in the air. So we're not actually adding any more CO2 to the planet. We're actually greening the planet with a lot of that CO2 that was captured by
Yeah.
that algae that was, probably trapped in some sort of a cataclysm, because it wasn't returned back into nature. So it had to have some sort of cataclysmic event that would cause it to be covered over by other things. So if humans do have a goal here on the planet, if we do come from this planet, it would probably to be releasing all of that CO2 so that we can green the planet. But nobody sees it that way because anything humans do for the past 50 years or so has been considered to be a bad thing. Even though
Well,
all that CO2 is right there and we're taking it out and putting it back into the atmosphere where it was originally.
look, I don't see anyone saying that the paper industry is one of the major responsibles for the poisoning of the rivers, because people don't know that a paper industry, the paper we use, our printers, our notebooks, whatever, is washed because the trees are not white. So it's washed, it gets bleach to get white, and all of that is done by millions of liters of water a day, millions and millions by each one of these facilities that take from the river and give it back to the river after all of this process. So, but no one is talking about the paper industry because we need the paper, right? So it's like that joke from Dennis Leary that is, don't eat the tuna fish, don't eat the tuna fish. Why? Dolphins are getting caught in the net. Well, then fuck the tuna fish then. Because, no, sorry, I made a mess of it. I don't remember. I made a mess of it. Okay, but the point is, people are not concerned with the tuna fish. They are concerned the fact that dolphins are getting caught in the tuna fish. That's why they don't want us to eat the tuna fish. So is this limited perspectives? And I'm sorry for having messed the whole joke, but well, I'm quite embarrassed right now. But the point is, it's always the perspective that people are pointing into in not seeing the overall situation. So I think it's easy to be confused by all the information that is coming out when no one has the curiosity to actually go and look for the actual data, because there is data showing that it's not CO2, that we need CO2 and we need more of it, not less. And yet you have this chancellor in the Germany that probably in America you never heard this, but some amongst middle year of past year, she made a statement asking people to euthanize their pets because they were breathing CO2 into the atmosphere, and it would be a considerable reduce in CO2 if they all decided to euthanize their pets. And this was publicly transmitted in televisions and newspapers. It was propaganded. So this is the state of humanity. You tell me, because I don't know if this is only the leaders, or there is really a really lack of awareness from the global population, because this should have been left to, not taken seriously.
Right. So I think our elites aren't addicted to oil. They're not addicted to any of these consumables. What they're addicted to is propaganda and power. That's the main addiction. So when they're telling you that you need to cut back, it's because they want to have more power over you. When they're telling you you need to do this, it's to have more power over you. And they have teams and teams of these propagandists who work all day long trying to figure out how to craft the perfect message to get you to do more of what they say so that they can have more and more control over your lives. So anything about global warming should be seen as a direct affront to your ability to be sovereign and your ability to have independence from their systems. I think that's a given at this point. So if that's the case, why would they tell us about a pole shift that's coming? Why would they tell us about any of the things that we would actually need to do to get prepared? I'm old enough to remember when being a prepper was a crazy thing, but it seemed for like a 10-year period, they sort of switched. And now it's good to be a prepper. And it's amazing to be a prepper. But I think that's more so that they can steal it from you. I think they want you to buy that stuff. They don't want you to trade for that stuff. They want you to buy it so that they can have the receipts in their records of their NSA vaults and go and get what they need to get from you when that time comes. I remember when I was in the Army, I was asking my first sergeant about what would we do in case of a disaster. And he said, well, I know where the farmers are. I could just go there and take their stuff. And I'll be like, but isn't that just stealing? And he's like, yeah, but it won't matter because it'll be an emergency. So we can just do whatever we want. And it's like, really?
It's
That's
in the
what
record.
Army is thinking about.
No, that's what the Army always did. If you go into the historical record, both the Allies and the opposing forces in Europe, for instance, when they need something, they go to the farmers and they take. They don't care where they are, because the Army is the most important thing at that moment. So they don't care. That's normal military policy, to take what they need from wherever they can. They don't care. So they turn on their own.
It used to be that we had public fallout shelters all over the country that were stocked full of food, stocked full of supplies. And if there was, in case of an emergency, everybody had to go to those fallout shelters because they were already stocked and ready to go. How come there's never been anything like that since? How close to nuclear war were we with Russia? And nobody even talked about any sort of fallout shelter or what we should be doing to save ourselves in case of a attack or anything like that, or a natural disaster. And you can see how they treat natural disasters, like in North Carolina when they had all this flooding going on associated with this hurricane. Where were they? They didn't give a shit. Get ready.
They're still building, right? They're still building. It's not fully repaired, right?
No, it's still not fully repaired. I mean, Trump did do a lot to try and help those people out, but FEMA, they were no-shows, and they still haven't fired or arrested anybody in FEMA that totally mismanaged that crisis or any of the other dozens of crises that happened under the Biden administration, like the train crash in Ohio, where it just spewed toxic chemicals into the air after they lit it on fire. And then they gave the bailout to the train companies. And I think that's one of the big reasons why people made that jump over to Trump so easily, is because Biden basically said, let them eat cake. We don't give a shit as long as it's not our preferred minority groups. We're not going to do anything about it. If we can't use it to get more power, we don't care. And you can see that sort of mentality starting to form when it comes to Trump and Israel. Every war is an opportunity for the government to grab more control. And so when he wants to get into this war with Iran, it's because bureaucrats in his administration and all administrations want to seize more power during those times of crisis. If you look back at the institution of the income tax before World War I, there was a massive push for war that caused them to increase the income tax. It was only supposed to be temporary. And then they pass a half-ass amendment to try and make that permanent. Well, it wasn't ratified by the state, so it's not really an amendment. And so the income tax is one of those permanent emergency items that everybody just takes as a given nowadays. So what new policies would we be looking at during these times of crisis that these governments want to put in? Well, I think we already know. We've got the whole WEF agenda, 15-minute cities, digital cash, digital IDs, a total social credit score system. And those people are behind the same social credit score systems that we have in China right now. So I think when we see them not doing anything to prepare for disasters, not doing anything to prepare the populations for the wars they want to get in, it's because they want it to be bad. They want to hurt you real bad, so that the only source of succor and the only source of immediate solution is to go to them for help.
One of the things that you might know that I don't is what happened to the CFR, to the Council of Foreign Relations, and what happened to the Trilateral Commission.
It's still there. They're still
because
around. No?
But they got completely off radar. They were right on the peak of the eye of the conspiracionists in the early 2000s.
Well, there's what happened is the conspiracy of the conspiracy theorists. in that they put everyone who says that there's a conspiracy pertaining to anything in a box and limited them to be like Tucker Carlson or XYZ, whatever character that is unliked, that promoted the idea that what's a conspiracy, that two people work together to do something. I mean,
Right.
how often is that happening in government and among governments and among corporate individuals, like all the time? If I may say, Headless, your point about the whenever there's a reference to the climate change exit, I would add too, to really, take a look at what's going on today and find out how these institutions are working together. Whenever there's any form of oligarchy, which is practically everywhere now too, right? This Orwell called it oligarchical collectivism in his book Within the Book. And 5 years ago, I remember using what I call the O word, and people didn't even know what oligarchy was. And the news, the only time you ever heard oligarch was pertaining to Russia, some fool in Russia, where as if there's not oligarchs and oligarchical collectivism in each kind of system. So whenever there's this like framework, as Ricardo and I were discussing the other day, pertaining to this huge electrical format that could have been done in micro formations, smaller units. Instead, it's this huge collectivist scheme that everyone's under, and it just is never works out for the individual, but always for the institution.
Right. And these times of rebuilding after these crises are the perfect time to cover up the past. And we
And
see
make
that
money.
over and over. Yeah, make money, cover up the past. That's gonna be the big push once the rebuilding starts to happen. We saw it in the 1930s when they were trying to rebuild from the Great Depression. They built all these dams all up and down the East Coast that were just flooding out all of these ancient villages and ancient sites from the Native Americans that now we don't have all the pieces when it comes to rebuilding and understanding the mound cultures.
Same
So,
here.
right?
Same in China.
Same here. The Foscoa is one of the most important sites in ancient pictograms and what we call art rupestre, and they flooded it. It was very controversial, and they just flooded just the same. They saved a few parts that the archaeologists managed to compromise, but the rest, even the village, is completely underwater. No, you can see even the roofs. It's completely underwater now. But in regards to what Ethan and you were discussing, I give an example. In my country, we are considered to be a Republican democracy, which means we have a president of the republic that has no power whatsoever, but is in charge. This is the number one, but he has no legal power, and he can reject a vote. Reject a vote of the parliament and say he doesn't accept it. But if it goes back to the parliament and they overthrow him, he can't do anything. So then we have the government itself, where we have 260 and some people representing 4 or 7 political parties. The problem is the vote is not independent. The vote is what the party decides the vote is. So it doesn't matter if there are 260 people or there are 7
Is that
people.
mandated? Can't like there be a wild card guy then represent?
No, because it's immediately transformed into what they call an independent. So if you become an independent, your vote doesn't count for nothing, just the same, because you're just one.
I see.
So, but the funny thing is, they prohibited. We have one thing called the ARTV, that is the television of the Assembly of the Republic, that films their conversation and their discussions and their votes and so on. And that we used to be able to see the corridors. After the sessions, they tried to get this or that politician on the corridors. That was forbidden. And I am going to explain why. Because they were having the most hot discussion almost in each one of those throats and so on. And the session ended. And once they go into the corridor, so my friend, where are you going to lunch today? You see? So it is a complete theater,
Right.
from the beginning to the end. They said people saw that, but people forget quickly, and then they forbid to film in the corridor, so we don't are no longer able to see that. But my question to you two is this: does it make sense that we are governed by people with no experience whatsoever in the area they are supposed to be governing? They have no conscience at all of what is to be a normal human being in a extremely weird society, living with the amount of money that people has to live with. They don't have any notion of that. So my question is, how did we allow ourselves to be transported from having people that are experienced, wise, and elders and know what they're talking about? And let's put someone like that into culture. Let's put something like that into agriculture. Let's put something like that in management, in industry, in economy, people that are really experiencing that, catedratics or professors or whatever. Why instead of that, we have this class that we call politicians, that are people that actually don't know anything at all besides stealing and being corrupt and serving their own agendas? Because if you don't serve them, you cannot go as a politician, because you're not accepted in any club. You have to have something rotten to be able to be accepted. And if you don't have, they create one for you and they film it in order they know that they can trust you. So
I think in the United States, the final cementing of that was Citizens United, that gave institutions the legal right to donate to any politician as much as they want. And so there's all kinds of, cultish and personality things going on, but the ability to do that really empowers individuals. Again, a headless, I bet you'd be able to add on that.
Oh, can I? So
and it's the end of the show.
Point out the devilishness of the Citizens United before you got into it.
right. So my big thing right now is making comparisons with Carthage and with our current type of franchise monopolistic governments. So the Carthaginian government is described as a republic with elements of democracy, oligarchy, and republicanism, right?
But for the listeners, wasn't there like a schism between the Carthage and the Greeks in the terms of race too, and location?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
right.
Carthage was originally an outpost of the Canaanites, the Canaanite Phoenicians. So this is like Syria area. This is Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon. That's the original sort of Canaanites. But before they were Canaanites, they were Minoans. So back when the Minoans and the Greeks were sort of, well, the Greeks were obsessed. They were called the Mycenaeans back then, but they were obsessed with Minoan culture, and they would raid and take all of the fine jewelry and everything from the Minoans, because the Minoans were the trading class of the world. They were the traders for everybody. So they had the control over the Aegean, over the entire Mediterranean region, and they were trading with everybody. The Minoans were known for that. Well, they had schism after schism that caused them to island jump all the way over to Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. And that's where they became the Canaanite Phoenicians. Now, from there, they went out and started so many different colonies around the Mediterranean, always on the coast, always doing the trading. And so when they founded Carthage, they had to come up with a democracy, or a way of keeping the trading going while also making people believe that they had some sort of control over that trading network with democracy, right? So they say the government was led by two suffets, or judges, who were elected annually from among the wealthiest and most influential families, and held both judicial and executive power. They were supported by a Senate composed of influential citizens who held positions for life. The Senate decided on declarations of war, military support for generals, punishments for commanders, and peace terms with the enemies. If the suffets and the Senate could not agree on an issue, the matter was decided by popular citizens' assembly. This system of checks and balances, along with public accountability and participation, characterizes Carthage's government. That's the same triple system we have today. You've got the executive, you've got the House, and you've got the Senate. It's the same system. And so what they would do is all of the big decisions were made behind the scenes with the suffets. All of the minor decisions were, basically passed off to the clown show Senate. And then if it really got bad, they would let people assume that they had some sort of say in the matter by giving it to the People's Assembly. But the entire thing was stocked full of these economic interests which ruled their society because they had to keep the ships going. That was their big thing. And these were the guys who first went all the way around the Cape of Africa, sailed over to India. And there's really no reason to believe that they didn't make it over to America, because in the early, I think it was 1990s, they made an exact replica of a Carthaginian trireme and sailed it across the ocean to America. And this goes back
Tor Ehrenheim or something like that is the name of the guy.
They did it with the Norse boats too. So
Yes.
Not only the Norwegian boats, but also the Carthaginian boats. Somebody had this constant access over to North America. This goes into what you were doing with the
I'm saying that the name of the researcher that built that boat and reenacted that voyage to prove it, his name is Tor Eidenhall. I was not talking about the Vikings. It's his actual name. It's the actual name of the guy.
I mean, he did it without any modern equipment, and he did it quite well. And there's no reason to believe that they weren't doing that back then. And it would kind of make sense if you think about the state of Carthage when it came to Rome, that they wouldn't want to bring any more undue attention to themselves. So instead of having an overt empire, they decided to go underground and have an underground empire. So at that moment, when Carthage was completely smashed and destroyed in the Punic Wars, they just decided to stop calling themselves Carthaginians, stop calling themselves Canaanites. They decided to become who? The Israelites. Because they were all cousins and they were all related in that part of the world. So, hey, the Israelites still have some clout, still have some.
It was a mishmash of cultures, all related maybe to the Israelites in some way or the Canaanites. But I was just seeing that the other day how there was Judeans or Israelites at Elephantine Island in Egypt, which is way in the southern part of Egypt. So it was. We look for the clean story of religion, and it's like it's not really there. It's just a complicated, mess of political and spiritual stuff coming together.
No such thing. There's so many examples from the book of Proverbs and Psalms where the epithets for the Jewish God come from the Baal cycle from Ugarit, which Ugarit's right in that same region of the Canaanite Phoenicians up in Syria, all the way down into Israel, and all that region was controlled by Egypt. The Septuagint was written in Egypt, so all of these different groups had these reminglings, and
Right.
that was the pathway for the world. So all of the world empires, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, they all came through that area. So when you find all these different stories popping up in the Bible that appear in other places, it's because all of those cultures were traveling through there, spreading their culture, spreading their stories. So,
and we have their anchors in the middle of the Atlantic in the Azores Island. So if they reach the Azores, why didn't they reach America? So there's no reason to think otherwise, because the current would take them there if they go beneath the island, and the current will take them back if they go above the island, because one catches the down current that we were talking before, and the other one catches the upper current.
And to your point, Headless, of how we don't know that they knew about it back then, because it was probably highly secret, state secret about power and control and expansion of their resources and so on. So like just Yeah, they would just, you're going to fall off the edge if you go that way. And of course, they knew that they were going to get some more gold and trade this and that.
Right?
Look,
There,
go on, go on.
they had a harbor in Carthage that was completely walled off. So you couldn't tell how many boats were in there. You couldn't tell where the boats were from. They were highly adept in keeping secrets. That was one of
Interesting.
their main occupations, is keeping secrets from everybody else. The spies couldn't see in.
The
So
replica in Spain is exactly the same. The one that they found in Spain, that some say it's Atlantis because it's a circular harbor and so on, it was exactly the same. So they have one at the end of the Mediterranean, and they had one right at the beginning of the Mediterranean at the Pillars of Hercules. So it's obviously a point of going out and going north or south because they reach all of these places.
Spain was a huge Carthaginian colony. This is where they got their silver from. This is where Hannibal Barca's land was. And this is why the Romans were able to defeat them, is because when Hannibal Barca was in Italy, all of the Romans that couldn't defeat these, these massive elephants coming down from the Alps decided, hey, why don't we just go over to Spain and fuck shit up over there? And so they did. And Hannibal Barca got called back over by the Senate to say, hey, you've got to protect our lands in Spain because the Romans are over there fucking everything up. And so he did, and they lost Rome. This is why they lost the Punic Wars, is because they were more concerned with property than they were with winning. Because after
Yeah.
they won, who's going to argue anymore? But they didn't think like that. They were so much more concerned about the property and the values and all the rest of this other stuff, which you would expect from a trading nation. They traded in slaves. They were one of the first metropolitan type existences where you have this melting pot of all these different cultures coming together over there. They didn't have any of their own troops. All of the troops that worked for them were these mercenary groups. And what do you see America trying to do now? Well, we've got all these immigrants. Why don't we just put them in the army? Let's have them go fight our wars for us.
Let's give them a gun, and a big one for that matter.
Oh no,
We're
that
visiting
doesn't the United
Carthage.
States military have recruitment offices in Mexico, I believe. Is that right,
Biggest
Headless?
recruitment office in the U.S. military is in Mexico.
Right. Yeah.
So are they expecting a big war, or they know?
Well, I
Right.
don't think that's not new that they've started that it's just the way they've been doing it for a while. So I don't know if it is.
So does that mean that the Americans are a bit discontent with the army life?
Well, I would call it. I mean, and Headless, I'll shut up. But I mean, I almost call it a poverty draft, right? Because not everyone needs to go in the military, and so people with money avoid it. And it does present opportunity, but I mean,
It
it
was a
really,
poverty draft back in the ancient world too. I mean, that's
right,
exactly what they
right.
did. Any displaced people, the Carthaginians would go over there and make them an offer. Why don't you come fight for us? So there were so many different Romans who pointed out, how do they even give orders to these different groups? They can't speak all these languages. They don't speak the Proto-Indo-European tongues of the Saxon people and all these other groups. And it was a melting pot. So they created the type of environment you see in America today. They're just importing all these different groups so that they can fill these positions, not necessarily effectively, but they're thinking more in terms of dollars and cents instead of, more spiritual matters again.
I guess the Mongolian hordes, they would give it's like the death draft. Like you could fight for us or you die. And I guess I mean other armies have done that too, not to single them out, but the word hordes comes from order followers. They would be this massive group of order followers, and they called them hordes. And to your point, Headless, they're like, how are they working together? Who are they? They're all different. Military necessity type of thing.
Absolutely. And that's a project that hasn't quit. The idea that you could take all these disparate groups and make them fight based off of this poverty draft is very, very old indeed. And I think a lot of what we view as sort of like these nationalistic conflicts between these different nations is more about getting rid of the surplus population that they may fear would unseat their franchise government operations.
Every war in history has been an internal war. Russia, we see right now, is getting rid of all kinds of people that they might not like, that a traditional authoritarian would not like, those in jail particularly, and so on and so forth. But yeah, every war is an internal war. Good point.
Right. And I think you got to break the spell, and people have to see war for what it is. It's human sacrifice. That's what it is. That's what it was in Carthage. They had so much human sacrifice going on. The gods Baal-Hamon and Tanit were their two main figures of worship. And in the 300 BCs, Greece and Rome had outlawed human sacrifice for over 1,000 years. But the one group that decided that they weren't going to go along with this common sense idea of not sacrificing people was Carthage.
You'd think it'd be common sense.
Well, the Romans perpetuated underground the sacrifice of children, especially the very young ones. But yes,
Carthage especially loved to sacrifice babies.
And I wonder how much of it was just as simple programming to make people accustomed to brutality, to do it and to receive it, right? Or you think there's more, maybe?
I think they were very pious about it, but they also thought, we can do this in a way to where we don't have to sacrifice our own children. So when they would have times of crisis, that's when they would get the kids out and start sacrificing them to Baal. Well, here's the thing. The rich people in the city, again, this, oligarchy, would pay the poor people, mostly these slaves and mostly the, mercenary wives. They would pay them to take their kids, and they'd strap this mask on them, and these creepy masks, like that Ricardo, you were showing me that these creepy masks have survived up until this day in the rituals in Spain and Portugal. But they would take these masks, they would put them on the babies, they would, throw them inside these toffets, and then they burn them alive. And they would take them from the poor people, and then the rich people would sacrifice them as if they're their own children, even though they're
exactly.
not. And so what do we see going on with abortion? I mean, come on. It's poor people that are aborting their babies. It's not the rich people, but the same sort of ritualistic mentality went into that. It was the Rosicrucians that actually created these spokeswomen for abortion that went around to all these different continents. They were in China, they were in Japan, they were in all these different countries and continents. What you know of the, what's her name? The lady who was all about aborting the black children.
I forgot her name, but
Can you repeat that? Aborting what?
Aborting the black babies. There was a woman in America that was going around advertising to...
Poor. She didn't put it like that. She put it poor. I no, certainly pretty close, but I'm just saying for Ricardo, who's in shock right now.
Right. So this was during the height of the eugenics movement and the Planned Parenthood. Was it called Planned Parenthood back then?
She was a big part of founding Planned Parenthood.
She was the founder.
She was the founder. Yeah.
Right. But there were organizations like that all over the world, and it came out of the Fabian Socialists. So the head of the Fabian Socialists was a Rosicrucian. So in this book, the 68th Convocation book, on the very first page, one of the main lectures that they're giving is about eugenics. And this was written in 1916. Margaret Sanger's her name. So Margaret Sanger was a huge eugenics component of getting that into play. And the idea there was that, what she said was 3 generations of moron is enough. And so she wanted to sterilize women. She wanted to abort babies. She was all about that sort of...
At that time, that was still institutionally taking place in the United States, mostly at mental institutions, but it was taking place.
Okay,
mysterious mental institutions.
Let me put a highly controversial point here. That is, do you think that everyone has the right to be a parent? And let me finish. I understand the point of freedom to decide to have a kid, but that implies awareness of having a kid. Now, my point is, should people have not a corrupt system, but a system well done and in place to see if people are capable or will be good parents, or are taking that step as a conscious decision, or if it happens by accident, if they are prepared to be parents. Because I see a lot of children that whose parents, I know this is highly controversial, but
I just think that the question, if you reach one answer as logical, all logic is flawed, right? But if you reach one answer that says, no, some should not be allowed to have children, then it's a matter of enforcement and a matter of really going into people's lives. So I think the answer in respect to the implications of saying, no, some people are obviously not good parents, obviously, in so many different ways, right? But I think the implications of negating that right would be too drastic to do so.
Well,
my fear is the corruption. Go on, Heather.
I was going to say that there is a more tribal component to this. So let's say that you've got a certain plot of land that is governed by a tribal eldership, and they make the determination that they're doing good. They don't need a lot of new people coming into their area. Well, I think if they're the ones taking care of the land and they're the ones doing this stuff and they're the only family in the area, the people who aren't allowed to have any more kids should be allowed to go where they need more people so that they can have a family. You see what I'm saying?
It's a good point. There's always a place for someone.
Right. We've lost a lot of the tribal mentality that went along with the Greek concepts of colonization, because as you know, Greece is not a very fertile place to live. It's a rocky outcrop in the middle of the Aegean. And so when they had excess population, they wouldn't just send them off to die. They would say, hey, we've got a new colony over here. Why don't you guys go over here and start this colony and build the families where you're needed so that we don't end up experiencing famine and death and all the rest of this stuff. We've already got it established. Well, that's a pretty efficient method of distribution as opposed to, hey, let's just kill all the babies.
Yeah, sure. I like that perspective a lot, because there's always a place for someone.
Killing all the babies?
No, that there's a place for everyone, no matter who you are, what you're doing, and what there's not a place for is human parasitism and greed upon each other, and as Headless pointed out, outright overt violence and killing people. That's obviously unacceptable, but there's always a place for someone, maybe not a place for greed, right? We don't have unlimited capacity for the human greed that's out there in some people, but there's always a place for someone.
Yeah, right. You go to Lisbon and you see that
they need a place.
This is not me being a racist, okay? That's sure. Why I'm not going to mention any race. This includes all races. We have lots of immigrants. Some are here for 2-3 years. Some are just recently some are here for 10 years, but they keep their traditions and they keep their customs. And so what you see is they have a children in one arm, a children in the uterus, and a children in the wheelchair. So, and it's one after the other, after the other, after the other, in people that don't have much resources. They struggle the social system, because the social system for us gives nothing, and for these people they are willing to get them enough, at least enough to live, and some live very well, because in the case of the gypsies, they take their sons, the sons of their sisters, the sons of their brothers, every single child that is in the community will enter that social center for each one of them that goes there to ask for support from the government, right? And there is a directive saying that do not deny to them because they're violent. If they are stealing electricity from a post, if they catch a regular citizen taking electricity from a post, he goes to jail and has a massive bill to pay. If they see a gypsy doing that,
that's crazy.
They have instructions to give them the right tools to do it so that they don't screw the electricity for everyone.
Tell me how far that would fly in the United States, Headless. a law based on race. And I understand the law. I mean, all logic is flawed. I understand they're flawed there, but that you just couldn't even do that in the U.S.
You're muted.
During the 2020s, they just decided to let the rioters go. They weren't going to stop them. The police let them
Sure.
go
Well,
because
that does.
they were too
But
violent.
I just mean like specifically a certain, racial group overtly in law. Like I definitely seen people let go in different environments. I get what you're saying, but I'm just saying like on the books, like.
Well, it probably happens way more than we know about.
No, it definitely does. And vice versa, right? Because when Occupy Wall Street was going down, they cracked down on that. Interstate mayoral and governorial projects cracked down on that. But if there was something, like you said, another one that suited something somewhere, somehow, they got the message to let it fly. Yep, I see it.
We have one region in Lisbon that it's called, I can't remember the name. Doesn't matter. It is right in the middle of Lisbon. And it's a vast square surrounded by buildings with a small garden in the middle and a fountain and a small artificial creek. And it's all taken 20, 30 years ago by Africans. Then it was taken by Indians. Now it's taken by Pakistanis. And they are all living in there. And they call it an independent country within Portugal. So when they have problems, they are still selling their products as they would in a normal market in their country. So there's no packages. There's just sacks open where they take with a hand and give you how many rice, how many corn, and so on. So when there's problems and the police has to go there, the last time it happened, last year, the guy that they were trying to apprehend, take a knife, stab the guard, and the guard, although they had the knife stabbed, still dominated the guy and hit him hard because you knifed me, you son of a. So that guy lost his license because we cannot touch them because they are oppressed people. And you are muted. They are an oppressed people, so the police cannot touch them. They have to endure their abuse and they cannot touch them. So they are revolted. And what happens? It's the normal citizen that takes with all of this frustration that they cannot touch this individuals. So this makes no sense. I think this makes a lot of sense because when I was a kid, there wasn't social neighborhoods. We are all the same. And then all of a sudden, they start bringing these massive people from Africa, from India, from Indonesia, and they create these social areas with buildings built just for them. So what happened? We used to have no crime, and all of a sudden, starting appearing these kids that decided that because we had shoes and because we had this or that, they took to the weaker and starting throwing kids from bridges, taking stuff from them. And this happened all over the country. This happened all over Europe. Sometimes sooner, sometimes later. This is on purpose. This is to create instability. This is to create, and for us not to feel secure. And as long as we are insecure, as long as we are in fear of warmongering, of taxes, of whatever it is that they invent every single week to keep us grounded, we don't have access to our spiritual nature. We cannot contemplate even what planet we are living in. We are just in this trap of 9 to 5, and our cookie is to watch a football game for those that like it, or to go to a concert. Take your pill and go to home and get back to work next Monday. And that's what they call living. And all of these people are living in this condition, some aware of it and trying to get out of it, and others enjoying it to the heart, because that's exactly what they want. This is what is life to them, to go to work because they love to work for other people and don't get paid enough. I don't know. Sorry, I'm ranting, but it afflicts me. This, as Ethan said, and very, very well, it's the lack of awareness of awareness. And I think that was brilliant, Ethan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Right. I think that fear plays a huge factor too. Just like Bumbleclot was saying, it's the fear that keeps people to their own areas, right? And as they're encroached upon by these no-go zones, they become more and more insular. They become more and more focused on the very few things that they can control and ignore the things that they believe they have no control over. And one of the things that they feel like they have no control over, this is the world over, is the money supply. They feel like they have absolutely no control over it. And in a lot of ways, the global money supply has been monopolized by the Bank for International Settlements, all of these central bankers. And in a way, they're able to prop up these businesses. People don't necessarily like. They're able to prop up these nonprofits that nobody voted for, and the governments are able to do their policies without having the vote of the citizenry. So it becomes very, very um, attractive for a government to focus solely on the needs of the central bankers instead of focusing on the needs of the people who supposedly got them elected to be in those positions. Even that seems really dubious to me because, as you can see right now, there's very few people who actually stand up to any of this on behalf of their constituents, because we're not here to make the constituents happy. We're here to make the central bankers happy. And if we can do that, then we get to keep our jobs. If we don't do that, they'll come out and get us. So it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling cycle of, these agendas coming to fruition. But I don't think that they can really do that if we see a sense of tribalism start to take back over in the areas that are considered go zones by the police. If we say, no, this is a no-go zone too, just like that one over there. If you want to get any money, go talk to them. You're not allowed in this area. That's going to throw off the dynamic for them.
What really hits hard in bad neighborhoods is people controlling the bad entities in that neighborhood, right? As you're making me think, listen. So a lot of it, I think, on a bigger picture, a lot of it has to do with, we all realize how messed up globalization is. We as individuals, we want people, as you told the story of those people in Lisbon, I intuitively want the best for them. But on the other side of it, I realize that the institutions are doing things in a way that's making things the worst for all of us. So it just seems like, that if globalization is the problem, the solution that's being presented in a big generalized way is nationalism. Well, that doesn't seem to be quite effective. But what about localization, right? With one respect being that guy on the block that's not letting it happen, for instance. But I think localization is the contrast to globalization, not nationalization, if you will. Because that plays into the powers that be's hands, right? That gives the institution, I'll take it however you give me. Globalization, nationalization, I got you right where I want you. Whereas localization is like, no. This is a no-go zone for you cops. We're all doing just fine.
But if you want to help these people, and I know these people need help, and although the fact that most of the people didn't immigrate, it seems that they have a checkpoint saying, please let me know if you are honest, never steal, have intention to work, and the guy doesn't press anything good. So, you can enter. But the person that says, I want to raise my family on a safe environment, I want to work as long as possible to keep my family, those doesn't get in. The only ones that get in.
That's the thing. I wonder how much institutional manipulation is behind that, because in general, what people don't consider when they're against immigrants in the United States is that immigrants come here hungry to make themselves better and thereby do work, and that feeds the taxes and so forth. And their kids too are driven to be super successful and hungry. Normally, I'm not saying what you're saying is untrue. I'm just saying that traditional immigration to states that have this freedom to make money at the very least, and not to mention other things, that they end up being hungry. No, I'm not trying to argue your point. I'm just saying it's interesting that they're not.
I was just going to give you an example. We started a few years ago to have this Bolt app, and there's another one, Uber and Bolt, that are the taxis by app on the phone, right? So what happens is 3 years ago, an Indian guy had 1,000 cars going in just one locality. And do you know how he gets these 1,000 workers that are supposed to speak Portuguese, are supposed to pass a test that has 72 hours of formation? And he's bringing guys not from the cities, but from the very rural areas where they have dialects that most Indians don't speak. So they are getting these guys from these areas, bringing them here, paying their voyage, living in bunkers in warehouses with 3 and 4 stories high beds, right? And they are paying him, working to pay him all he spent in the course, in bringing them, in feeding them, which means that 10 years later, they still haven't paid the guy, right? But because they can get, I don't know, 100 years a month, perhaps, because there are many, and 100 years, consider that they there in India would struggle to make $1 a day as a pay. They are cool with it. They don't mind being slaves because it's a better life that they would have in their rural area that would never come out of farming and try to survive each year from what they produce. And they prefer that. But if you come here to the fields here, you have these people that are not paying taxes. They are being truly enslaved. They're being transported to the fields to work for literally nothing. And along we find 1 or 2 places each year and release 50 or 100 workers. But there's thousands of there here in the fields that I see transported in vans all back and forward into the field that they don't appear in society. We don't know where they are because they never leave the fields. They go to the warehouse, they sleep there, they wake in the morning, they go and work, and so on. So there's a lot of ways to take advantage of these immigration laws that are taking. And if you want to really help these people, and that's how I started, if you really want to help these people solve the problem in their countries, don't bring them out of their culture into another, because it's bad for them, it's bad for the other culture, right? There are exceptions, of course, but if we want to help them, let's solve the problems in their country. Let's see who's the guy that is causing all this. What's the agenda that's behind it? Let's solve those problems, because there's no justification for hunger. There's no justification for lack of medical attendancy. And there's no justification for the money that is spent in the military complex. Let's use that money to solve all of these world's problems. And then maybe we can live in peace, where a color of a man is no difference from the color of his eyes.
Well, I agree with that point, but just think about it like this. Britain actually overtly attacked slave ships. They were the country that had plenty of slavery for hundreds of years. But when it was finally canceled, they were the country that said, we find a slave ship, we're taking you. No more. Am I correct, Ricardo?
Yes, absolutely.
And not to say that there wasn't all kinds of problems with England, especially vis-a-vis their neighbor Ireland, but just to point out that they did shift, right? And so same thing with a lot of countries, the United States and European countries especially got rich off of Africa per se. So inviting these people in is a shift. And it's obvious to me that there's moral failings in inviting them in and not giving them adequate place or even, a job or whatever. There's definitely problems with that, and they're probably doing it on purpose to make people that are in your community upset for obvious reasons that they would be upset.
We have 7% of unemployment. 7% to 12%
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying the principle of, like, hey, England going to war to stop slavery, not that they went to war, but England making overt ceasing of slavery, good for them. It doesn't negate what they did, and I'm sure that caused problems. I'm just saying that it's a shift in at least that the powers that are more powerful than other countries are not, you're right, they should be helping them. At least they're trying to invite some people in to try to help them in theory, right? I'm just
In
saying.
theory, I think in a lot of ways, what we're not seeing is what slavery is downstream from. So all of this stuff is downstream from the banking and economic systems that govern those societies. So when England is going to war against slave ships, they're doing so because that's downstream of their newly formed central banking model. And so they don't want slaves that are working for free that you can keep on your property that you're not
Everyone is a
paying
client.
taxes on, right? They get more money not having
Well,
slaves
but
around.
there's still a lot of slaves, though. I guess you're still right, even though they're in nations that don't have banks connected to the super banks. They're still producing chocolate, for instance, right? That's one of the most consumed product on the planet that has been most touched by slavery, overt slavery. Still,
Right.
to
So
your
let me throw another little wrench into the mix here. So this is the etymology of the word God in Egyptian. It's neter or netcher, and they call it an axe, but really it's a flag, right? And so
right.
normally it'd be this green flag. So they say that this is a cult flag, and that this represents these gods. And what if we still have these occult flags and they're flying outside the UN right now? And so what they want to do is they want to turn the governments into the gods, into these cults, and then rule the cults as franchisees of a much larger system. And as you can see here, you've got the Ogdad, the Ennead, all of these things. What would you call a 250 god system? Well, you call it the UN, right? So this is a different sort of take, but I think it plays out pretty well because these aren't axes, these are flags. And the idea of the flag is to get you looking at the flagpole and identifying with the symbol that they hand you and saying, hey, go out there and kill those other people with that other colored flag.
I think that's why atheism is so popular today, is because of the religiosity crisscrossing with these warmongering, power-hungry powers that be, right? Did you know El, Baal, who you mentioned before, and Yahweh? They're Canaanite before Yahweh was Jewish. And there was all kinds of beef with them and the Egyptians. And that is why, at one point, at least, the Canaanite god Yahweh was the donkey-headed god, which was Seth too. Seth is the donkey-headed god, the god of storms and chaos. And so they wanted to say, yeah, well, we're like Set to your Ra and Osiris. And there was all this back and forth with the ideation and so forth.
Satanic inversion much? So what they would do is they took this idea of Set, this god of foreigners, and everything else, and said, this is our one God. Now, again, it's sort of the subtext. You have this guy by the name of, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. Let's see how. His name is, oh, shoot.
That's a funny name.
Yeah, no, not oh shit. His name is Josephus, Flavius Josephus.
He's the great historian of all that era, right?
Right. He made a defense of the worshiping of this donkey head. And instead of actually defending the belief in Set, what he said was that the Egyptians were more animals. So what difference does it make if the Jews actually worship one? So he didn't really deny it. He just said, well, you guys worship more animals and we're above the animals. Again, it made no reference whatsoever to the ancient gods or syncretism. It was just that, well, who cares? We can worship a donkey. What are you going to do about it? So I've got the phrases right here that he used. He said, which among them are gods, since an ass is not more contemptible an animal. As for us Jews, we ascribe no honor to power asses, as do the Egyptians to crocodiles, asps, when they esteem such as are seized upon by the former or bitten by the latter to be happy persons, and persons worthy of God. Asses are the same with us, which they are with other wise men, creatures that bear the burden that we lay upon them. So God to them is a creature that they lay burdens on. Back to the nature, right? You're seeing that linkage. The gods to them are what they put their burdens on as a society. So if anything goes wrong, that's God's fault. You know, the God of
Oh,
the gaps
and I think
Not fault. That's God's will. That's different.
in a recent sense, it's a lot easier to look from outside in sometimes. When we're in the thick of it, right, it's hard to really understand or have better awareness of awareness. In fact, with the Soviet system, now the Russians are very much into Orthodoxy Christianity that was formerly there, but during the Soviet system, it was kind of ixnayed. It was on the outs, but you can see the same kind of, I call it the monotheistic mindset, right? This monotheistic leniency, and instead of there being a religious godhead, it was the state godhead, and it comes out in their art, in their rhetoric, in their politics, and so on. And we all do it. We're human, but just as a
who are the
micro.
high priests? Who are the high priests of the Soviet system?
The Congress, right? What were they called?
No,
I forget what they're called.
it wasn't the high priest. It was Soviet psychologists.
The party. The psychologist. Sure.
The
Yeah.
psychologist was where the rubber met the road. So you would be ordered to go see a psychiatrist in the
Sure.
Soviet
Right.
system. They would declare
Notorious.
you insane for disagreeing with the party, and then they'd send you off to the gulags. What are they trying to do now with their pharmacology in America? Well, if you disagree with the party, we're going to have to send you to one of these psychiatrists to get doped up. And they do it to our boys as soon as they hit the school. So instead of seeing these boys as active and full of energy and full of life, they're like, that's too much energy. That's too much life. Take this pill. We've got to drug it out of you. And so they're
Sure.
guilty before even proven innocent. And, our boys are being most affected by that because the boys have energy.
Why do the parents buy that?
The high priests are saying it.
Yeah. Right. There you go. Yeah. The guys in magic white coats.
You're telling me that they believe so much the system that when the system tells them that their son is not normal and has to be medicated,
I think most
they
people
agree with that.
Most people
Well,
will listen to others.
I'm sure if they spent more time with the kids, then they wouldn't think that. But as far as it goes, when they're in these school systems, it's kind of a black box. You don't know what exactly is happening in school. You can't judge it for yourself. You have to take the word of these people who are all on pharmaceutical drugs themselves. So
something I was thinking about on a deeper level. I'm just observing as a martial artist these circumstances where people get into fights and what happens and how they deal with it. And it seems to me it's totally subjective. It's just my humble look at things. But it seems to me that it used to be there was a response when people got tangled up by someone. And now people are like grabbing their phone, and there's not a self-defense response as much with people. Am I silly to point that out or suggest that that's a possibility?
you're absolutely
Go on, Heather.
Oh, I was going to say that a lot of what we see about these conflicts in school arises out of the zero tolerance policy that has been adopted by every school in the nation. So a zero tolerance policy punishes not just the bully, but
Doesn't
also
matter who started it.
the bully's victim, right? And so this policy actually got started in the 1970s and 80s in the post office. This was their petri dish for the zero tolerance policy. And I don't know if you remember this, but back then they had something called going postal.
Yeah, of course.
Going postal, which is where these bullies in the post office would
Oh, I thought
both of them get punished, and then he comes back with a high-powered rifle.
Right. Okay. Oh, right. Yeah. I didn't know it had to do anything with bullying, but just a bad reaction. going
That's
postal was bad
No.
reaction to work.
That's why it happened. So they
Right.
took this petri dish and they emptied it into all these bad policies that they formed in the post office as their little trial chamber. They emptied that into our school systems. And now, instead of getting the good reactions that we would expect through an education system that opens these children's minds and allows them to flourish, you have the zero tolerance policy that actively victimizes.
But it's
little
got to
boys.
be more that like causes someone to not fight back. But
Oh,
I mean, you're right. It may be just that. It may be just that. But it just seems to me that that might be just part of like even a bigger set of things.
Well,
everybody knows if
not
you fight
fighting
back,
back.
you go to the principal's office and you get a ticket to that school
It's just an
officer.
inclination that's just chosen so many times that
yeah, that's a very clever move for the system. You have to understand that,
sure.
because it takes the fight out of you. But
Sure.
there's only two ways
Doing that.
there's only two ways your reptilian brain can react: is when common sense disappears, either you coward or you fight back as a maniac. So most people don't have the maniac in them. Most people don't have much in them, so they just resume to, because of them as a potential, but because of what the system has made out of them. And you must realize, in terms of the schools and so on, to me the problem starts many years ago, when, and I'm not being sexist, because to me it's indifferent if it's the father or the mother that stays at home, but they manage to take both parents out of the home. That's the step that was more important to them, is take the children out of the parents. So what happens today is a child with 3 months old is put in a preschool. So the parents go to work. She stays there for 9 to 10 hours a day. And when finally the parents go and get it, bring it home, have a meal, and put it to sleep. Next day, they are with it 15 minutes to take it back to the system. And this continues for 18 to 20 years of their life. So who are the parents in the middle of all of this? Is the system, or are the parents? Because then the parents doesn't have time to the children, because they don't have time to themselves too. So they have to decide if they donate the time that they have for themselves to give to the children, or even if the children have any interest on spending that time with them, because they are all strangers, because they always sleep. They have a meal when they have, and they sleep in the same house, but that's about it. So by all of this distanciation makes that it's no longer the parent or the mother that says, son or daughter, if someone is rude to you, you have to do this and this. I don't care about the rules. But everyone is subjugated. So no one has this freedom of thought. And even when that happens, it's all sadness. No one says, but you did wrong. Next time, grab a goddamn chair and fill it in his head. Because that's what I told my children. The first thing you can grab, break it on who's ever touched you immediately. And I'm there to take full responsibility because you broke an arm or a leg or a head or send someone to the hospital. I'll be the first to be responsible for that, because that's my instruction. Because the first time you become a victim, you stay a victim.
Right. Big time. That's so important when it comes to learning martial arts and everything else, is that you have to have the ability to respond, or else you turn all of your anger, your angst inwards, and it becomes these pathologies that become much more difficult to break later on in life. I've got a pathology that becomes really difficult to see later on in life, but it can't be unseen. Get ready for that one.
Wait, what is this? Oh, yeah, sure.
Boys are graded more harshly than girls. So what they did is they had both boys and girls submit the same papers to the same teachers, and the
Wow.
teachers would go much more harshly on the boys
How
than
interesting.
the girls. So
Did
not
they
to be
come up with
sexist,
a theory for why?
because the women who are running these classrooms hate boys. They've been
Right,
trained their
right,
entire
okay.
lives on feminism to hate boys, and they do. And everything they're fed in the media hates boys. And so is it any wonder that all of our boys are manic depressive and turning into these soy creatures? They're
And
taught
single.
that.
And single. And what are the requirements for meeting people nowadays? It's like it's ridiculous that there's all these requirements for people to date one another, and there's all these social media restrictions, it seems, and judgments. It's
Well,
getting
I'm not
worse.
seeing any restrictions. I'm seeing quite the opposite. I'm seeing
Really?
promiscuity and
there's certainly promiscuity too. Yeah,
It
sure.
always
look,
starts that way.
if you rise at children seeing the video clips and the bands and the music
I'm
that they
just saying,
now,
like, that people are promiscuous, like, towards materialism and not necessarily being real. You know.
What happens to promiscuity under economic pressures? Turns to
Right.
hatred, right? It turns to, well, I can't take care of myself and I'm seeing this person get all this stuff. Well, I hate that person. All of these pressures that are then put on society because we have a constricting or collapsing economy then turn into much deeper issues that, can affect the way that we see each other. And in Japan right now, fathers have absolutely zero parental rights. And this has been the case since the 1970s. And what happened to Japanese population?
Nowhere down.
Dropped off. Well, in the West, it's the same thing. Fathers have zero parental rights. Well, why would you have relationships if that's the case? You don't get to have a future, and she gets to take all your money, and you end up being villainized by these family courts. And the family courts are very, very much a product of these secret societies. They formed the idea of a family court, even though it has nothing to do with civil or commercial law. Like the entire idea of a family court is just entirely invented by these
and
people.
no equity, no morality, nothing whatsoever. It's just what is decided. It is for the other cases. It's just repeat, because there's no chance it's different. There's no chance this woman is not the most indicated of the parents to stay with the kids. It's not possible because he has tits.
Cookie cutters.
It's
cookie
proven.
cutters, right? It's
Yeah.
just, you either fit in the cookie cutter or we cut you out. And that's all that matters to these judges is they don't look at people as individuals. You are a function of your gender. You are a function of your class. You are a function of all of these things.
Look, I had a friend that I don't see perhaps for 20 years, but last time I see her in the birthday, she's already a judge. And I haven't seen her for 2 years or so. And so I asked, it must be amazing, right? You have the power to decide according to the situation and all of that. In my ingenuity and in my naiveness, that's the word. And she replies to me, no, you are completely mistaken. I have no liberty whatsoever. I have to go. The only thing I have to do is to see if there are past cases that are identical, and I have to repeat the exact sentence of the other cases. Otherwise, I'm discrediting the judge or the lady judge that made that decision back then. So this is exactly like academic work. They are constantly repeating what comes before in order to follow the protocol. Because if you don't, they immediately say, oh, I'm sorry, but your position, now you have to remove to that bottom office down there, and we have no more vacancies for you to attend to court. So you'll just take administrative work, and that's it. Not an excuse, not a justification, nothing. Either you comply or you don't. But if you don't comply, you don't have a career. You'll stay forever in that bottom end office and everyone hates you. So people make choices.
A lot of people don't know this, Ricardo, but the entire academic system comes out of the medieval monk priesthoods, where the tenure was given to the person who was there the longest. They would then have the say over anybody else under them. It doesn't matter what you were talking about, what inventions you had, what new ideas you wanted to do. There was no meritocracy. It was only based off of this idea of tenure, which comes directly out of the Middle Ages church-like control over these institutions. And again, I keep coming back to the church because that is the cookie cutter stamp that they keep applying to every institution. It has to be more church-like. It has to be more church-like.
Look, this to me is quite ironic, is the fact that in the 19th century, they decided to end the natural philosophers and create the academics. And this means to transition from metaphysics into materialism, from catastrophism into uniformitarianism, from animism to evolution. So we made all these transitions because they were very concerned, they say, that religion was going to have a detrimental impact into science deduction. And so they decided to eradicate the dogma of science, of religion and of spirituality from science, as if science could only be observed by what is matter and why can be detected in the years that we have records of. And therefore, by following this narrative, what they ended up and what we see today is that they created a dogma stronger than religion, because they're a tighter group, so they don't have as many divisions. So they are a more concise group in terms of their dogma worldwide than religion itself. That doesn't allow anything new to be introduced without their scrutiny, or without finally the guy died and now we can change the book or whatever. So this is why we have an academic world that is years from where it could be, because we are stopping ourselves from reaching the answers. There are good academics out there, there are good archaeologists, there are good scientists, but when they present their work, it's not accepted. So either they go independent and then they lose their funding, or they keep doing just the tasks that they give them. And from the point that you deliver that paper that will revolutionize things, the things that you are being given back from them to work will be minimum. You'll be set into a corner, but at least you have your grants and you can make your life and so on. And people make decisions once more. You see a lot of people coming against this, but all of them are on retirement. They only start speaking once they reach retirement. Yeah, because they will block you. They will forbidden you for giving classes. They will expose you from the university. They will expose you from the academic forums, and you'll be completely segregated. And they say that this doesn't happen, and we see hundreds of examples of this happening. I interviewed at least 2 people to whom this was done, and they have the papers to show and the responses that they gave them. One of them invented a mathematical process, and he's a mathematic, and they returned the paper saying that they couldn't accept it because that mathematics was not invented yet. Do you understand? It was invented on the paper. The man invented the mathematics, and they rejected it because it was correct, but it hasn't been invented yet, which means that none of their names came up with it, so they can't be accepted. So this is the academic world we have today, and it's a shame but at least gives us a chance as alternative researchers, and I like to call us alternative factual researchers, because our weight is getting bigger and bigger as we are trying to make sense of really what have to be analyzed, instead of they analyzing only that portion that interests them. So again, sorry for the rant.
No, I think this is probably a good place to kind of close it up. And I want you to tell people where they can find you, where they can donate, because it's very, very important to understand, unless we form these alternative institutions, nobody else will. It's up to us.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Ricardo Calvario. I formed Institute for Natural Philosophy, which is an institution that tries to help these alternative researchers that have projects, that have ideas, they have things to develop. We are trying to get funding for them. So contact us at institutefornaturalphilosophy.org. You have the contacts there. Fill in the professional positions if you think you have something to add to the institution. You have, although it says professional positions is what it is, the legal term, but you can volunteer there. So you're not necessarily being a job. It can be part-time. You can just explain what are your abilities. If you are a recent formed or you have an inclination to animation, we are desperately need someone with animation abilities, because of we are creating several documentaries at the moment, and that would be excellent for us. So if you have that skills, contact us, but take notice that there is not a lot of money, but we share it equally between all that do each job. As for me, you can find my books at Amazon. It's Resonant Earth and Stardust. And you can find me at X in Ricardo Calvario 1. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed, and let's make lots more of this.
Absolutely. Ethan, tell them where they can find you and tell them about your books.
That was wonderful. Thank you guys so much, Ricardo. Props for what you're doing. Yeah, I have a few books on Amazon, easy to find. Ethan Indigo Smith, and I'm on all the social media. And I'll share a website with you too. I got a couple websites out there. Geometry of Energy is it's one of the main ones. So I thanks everyone for checking us out. And Headless, Ricardo, thank you so much for
Thank you.
wonderful communication.
Thank you. And I'm the Headless Giant. You can find my show on Thursday nights where I can read your emails. If you will follow the banner below, you can email me your stories at headlessgiantpodcast.com. Your stories of the esoteric, occult, magical, or paranormal experiences. And I will read them with my co-host Nick from the Occult Rejects. So, guys, have a wonderful time. Think about what we're saying, and donate to the Institute for Natural Philosophy because they need it, and we don't have enough alternative institutions that are doing the kind of professional work that Ricardo here is doing. So, thank you very much,
Thank you.
and we'll see you again next time. This has been the Trialogue with Ethan Indigo, Ricardo Cavallero, and me, Headless Giant. See you next time. Bye.